Okay, I think it's time to start. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's KubeVela's community meeting. And first, welcome everyone, and please sign up in our meeting notes that I sent in the comments. This helps a lot. Thank you. And in today's meeting, we're gonna have two parts here. So first, Da will give us a little introduction to our two new blogs. The first one is Napptive with KubeVela, and the second one is KubeVela 2022 Retro. And after that, Da will also give us a little introduction to our new takeover and read-only policy to take over the resources that already existed in the cluster. So Da, are you ready to share your screen? Hi.
Sorry, I cannot hear you now. Is my microphone broke?
No, I can't hear her as well.
Oh.
Okay, so it's the host's network problem. And I hope the recording still works. And okay, so I will give the detailed introduction to the blogs and some new features today. And now I will share my screen. Okay, can you see me now? It should be the Chrome page.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so let's start. So today I will give first I will give us two introduction to two released new blogs. And if anyone is interested in those blogs, you can go to the official KubeVela's official site and see the blogs here. And I will go over it fast and let you know what it's about. And after that, I will show you two recently developed policies. One is the takeover policy, and the other one is the read-only policy. So they are all about how to manage resource when a resource is already exists before the application is delivered. So it can be used to help you to like to install KubeVela on top of some pre-existing system and let the KubeVela application coexist with other existing resource. Okay, I will give more detailed introduction later. So let's start with the blog introduction. And the first one I would like to introduce is that is the Napptive's integration with KubeVela, especially the OAM application. So Napptive, Daniel is one of the most active maintainer in our community meeting. But I think recently he does not come up. Maybe he's busy with other things. But previously he always go here and share lots of ideas. And he is the CTO of the application platform company called Napptive, and they have a product which provides cloud native application delivery. And he writes the article about how to use the KubeVela and the OAM applications to build that application platform. So here the blog is about, the blog starts with some basic ideas for the application delivery on Kubernetes, and then he introduced some details for what Napptive application platform is and how to play it with KubeVela. And also there is some very advanced features in KubeVela that has been applied in Napptive. For example, there are multi-tenancy, and there is some isolation between different user space. So it can be seen as a pretty good practical usage for KubeVela application to build some application platform. So if anyone is interested how to build application platform, with the support of multi-tenant and some the isolation capability for separating different users' usage, it would be a best practice for reference. And also, it would be cool if anyone is interested to directly use the Napptive application platform to deliver their OAM applications. So I think it's very cool to share this blog, and I think someone might be interested in it. Okay, so the second blog I would like to go over is that recently we KubeVela team also writes a blog that and also the presentation that we have made to several different community meetings, including the CD Foundation and also the TAG application delivery community meeting, which is outside our own community meeting. And the recordings is actually in the video section, and you can see that the CD Foundation's video, but the application delivery parts we do not, the TAG community meeting, we do not have that recording. And we have also a very similar presentation on the KubeCon's office hour. And although there are slight difference between the materials across them, but the main idea are almost the same. So we have just convert those videos into articles so that if you just want to focus on the textual material, and you can just go over with this document. And this document and the presentation go over all the features, generally all the features of KubeVela which we have nowadays, from the most starting points, from what is KubeVela and why we need KubeVela. So it talks about the challenges and difficulties for application delivery on Kubernetes nowadays, and how KubeVela is built to solve those problems. We start from the open applications model, and we have the very critical part is that we use Qlang language to work as the abstraction layer, and to make models for application to manage resources. And it talks about how the components and traits are designed. And in addition to that, we have the unified delivery part, which talks about the multi-cluster delivery and cloud resources. And also we have the add-on integration and very detailed introduction for how KubeVela workflow is about. Although you might not be able to find the detailed examples for how to run a KubeVela workflow, but it gives the general design idea of why we need KubeVela workflow and what it could be do. Okay. And after that, we have the day 2 management, including the resource management, and we have version control. The resource management covers the garbage collection, the configuration drift prevention, and also the resource sharing part, which are the resource policies we have up to version 1.6. And also today's topic is also about another 2 new resource policies. And I think maybe next presentation, we will add those new resource policies into the resource management part later. And also we have the very critical feature in version 1.5 and version 1.6, which we have been developing for several months on KubeVela, is the observability. So from the start point, we have some built-in tools, including the Vela CLI and the Vela UX, which provides a very straightforward view for you to see the applications and how they work. And we also have the integration with many popular observability open source projects, such as Grafana, Prometheus, and Loki. So with the add-on integration, it is possible to integrate those open source projects and make customizations on top of that for your KubeVela application. Okay, so these are the basic capabilities we have in KubeVela. And finally, we have a very brief overview for all the built-in components we have in the KubeVela ecosystem, including the Vela UX and the Vela CLI, which I think everyone is familiar with. And for the Terraform controller, I think the guideware guys are very familiar with this one because it can help you to manage the cloud resources easily. And for those who use multi-cluster delivery, the cluster gateway part is a very critical part for you to know or to use. And if you want to have some lightweight bootstrap for your KubeVela environment, it would be helpful to use the VelaD project. And for observability and other extension API, we have the Vela Prism project. And recently we have developed some very cool features on the Vela Prism, which is called as dynamic API. And I think it might be able to release in version 1.7, but the details of the usage and the idea will be enclosed in other articles after that. And also we have separates the KubeVela's application workflow outside as a separate project as Vela workflow. And it can be very useful if you only want to do simple delivery part or make some upper layer orchestration over multiple applications. It would be very useful to use the workflow controller directly. And it can also work together with the application workflow as well. And finally, we have introduced some stability issues, including several load testing and the results for those load testing and some recommend configurations for you to use in your clusters. And we have a very brief conclusion for the development of the KubeVela community, including the adopters and our growth of the community. Okay, so that's all for the article. It's a pretty, it's relatively long, but it gives you a relative comprehension overview for all the topics we have in KubeVela nowadays. Okay, so if you want to have some detailed instructions for those topics, you can go inside this blog and see the details. Okay, I see that the Zoom has noticed me that my network connection is not stable. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I will go on with the second topic. It's about a very short introduction to or a very short demo to two recently developed policies, which is the takeover policy and the read-only policy. I think the basic idea for these policies are very simple, is that if you have already some existing resource in your Kubernetes cluster, how to let your application, KubeVela application, to work together with them. So let's see a very simple demo. Because these documents and the reference has not been uploaded to the official document site, and the function will, this module will be officially released in version 1.7, which is estimated to be released at the end of December. So if you want to try these features, you need to build KubeVela's core controller on the master branch by far. But I think you will not wait for a very long time for the come out of the release version 1.7 alpha 0.1, which I think will be in next week. Okay, so let's start with the demo. So here is a Kubernetes cluster we have, and we can see that there is a deployment exists in our default namespace called engines. Okay, so let's go to very simple application, YAML. Okay, so let's copy this one. So the most classic usage for application is to use the web service component to deploy a deployment in your Kubernetes cluster. And with this application, let's name it as an example. It will try to deploy a web service in the default namespace, since we do not specify the namespace. And the image will be set to Nginx 1.16, and it will carry a trait called expose, which is used to set up a Kubernetes service object and to expose the port of the pod to outside for access. And let's see what will happen if we apply this application to our system. I hope the network is fine. Its waits a bit long. Maybe my network is not very stable, but it works. Okay, let's see the application. Okay, it's now running workflow, and let's see what happens inside. So there is the error message that that indicates that the deployment cannot be deployed. The reason is that the deployment engines already exists, and it is not managed by any application. So this is a safety mechanism for KubeVela. That is, if you try to deploy an application, that the application try to manage some resource that is not that does not belong to it, the application will the application controller will prevent the application to deliver that resource. So it can be useful if you have two different systems in your KubeVela. For example, you use Helm or you use Argo CD or other delivery tools to create some deployment, and your application, due to some error configuration, it tries to overwrite the existing deployments, and this will be prevented so that the resources controlled by other system will not be touched. So this is a very simple use case for KubeVela until version 1.6. But sometimes we might want to let the application to be able to manipulate this deployment in different cases. So some of the cases is that, for example, if we just want to attach a new service to the deployment or the web service, but we have to use the web service to represent this component. So let's go to see this application. So this application is called it use a special policy called read-only. And you can see that the read-only policy specifies that the resource with type deployment will be treated as the read-only. So the read-only object in application, it means that the application will not write this application. It will only see that application if it is healthy or not. So if we set up with the web service component, it means that the health check of this web service will also see if the Nginx deployment is healthy or not. But it will not try to create one if it does not exist. So it's expected that the Nginx deployment already exists in your Kubernetes cluster. But with that trait, it means that although the deployment itself is read-only, the service object will be attached to that deployment and works. So let's see what will happen with that. Okay, I will modify this one to the example. I think the network is not very good now. So let's wait a few seconds. It's quite long. Maybe, yeah, it works. Okay, so now we can see that the example application is running now. And if we use Vela status to check this application, I misspell it. Okay, we can see that the application's component is healthy and the service object is works. So we can see that there is a deployment which is named as Nginx, which we have seen before, and now it comes up with a new service also called Nginx. Okay, so that's read only. So if we use we delete this application, only the Nginx service will be deleted. But the deployment, since it is specified as read only, so it will be remain as untouched. Okay, so that's read only policy, and this mechanism can be used to do some auxiliary resource dispatch, and also you can use it as a monitor to your underlying resources. For example, if the deployment itself is unhealthy, and although the component will, the application will not dispatch that deployment or modify the deployment, it will see that the deployment is not healthy, so it will prevent your workflow from deploying normally, and it will treat the delivery of the application as failed. So it will be helpful if you want to let your application to work together with some existing resources, but you want those resources to be keep untouched. So this is the how to use the read-only policy. Okay, so let's go start with the other policy called takeover. So compared to the read-only part, there is another scenario that we want to modify existing resources, or we want to let the application to take over the control of that resource and let the resource be able to be manipulated. So at this time, you just need to change the read-only policy to take over. Okay, so but there is some something you need to know, that if you use the web service to dispatch your application, it means that the web service components always have some specialized deployment spec. So if you just want to modify part of the existing resource, you could not directly use the web service part. Instead, you can use the K8s objects, K8 as a Kubernetes object component type. Okay, so with this part, you will see that you specify that you want to deliver a deployment named Nginx, but there is no spec specified in it. And there is a trait called scalar. It means that you can modify the replica field of the deployment and remain all the other fields as untouched. So, and then you can use the takeover policy to specify that the application will be able to modify all the deployment resource it wants to write to. So let's start with this application. And for this application, I placed another deployment. Let's start with a deployment called Nginx in the demo namespace. Okay, we can see that there is a deployment in the demo namespace called Nginx we just created. And if you do not have the takeover policy, this application will be will not be able to deliver it correctly. Okay, let's see it in the demo namespace. And we know that if you do not have any policies inside this application, you can see there is only a component without any policy, and it will report the error that the deployment is not managed by the application currently. And if we take the, we add the takeover policy to this application. Okay, now let's see the application again. Okay, so it enters the running state. And if we go to see the deployment in the demo namespace, we can see that it now has 3 replicas. So, but the image and other fields are kept the same with the previous one, although we do not specify any image field in the deployment in the application here. So with this takeover policy, it means that you can just let other resources, other existing resources to be able to be managed by the application. So if you try to delete this application, since the deployment is now managed by the application here, so the deletion of the application will also delete the deployment. Okay, so that's how takeover policy works. So these 2 policies actually gives you a way to manage the resources that does not belong to KubeVela application previously. But you need to notice that when you use takeover policy, it means that you will try to take the control of the resource. So it can only work if the resource is not managed by any other application. So if you try to let this application to take over the resources of other application, it will still be prevented as well. But read-only, since it does not cause any modification to those resources, read-only can be applied on the resources, even if it is managed by other application. For example, some of the application might be able to create the deployment, but you want to monitor it through another application. It will be possible to use read-only to achieve that. And I think we will give some more detailed examples and scenarios in the documentation once this feature is officially released in version 1.7. Okay, so that's all for today's today's sharing. And if anyone is interested or have any questions for the feature or other questions, please just raise it up.
Hey, Diet, just confirming, if you're doing read only and taking using a read only and associating with a Kubernetes object, when you delete the application, that the read only Kubernetes object would not be deleted, correct?
Right.
All right, thanks.
So as in our design, the read-only policy, one of the usage is that you can actually provide different views for the resource combination inside your Kubernetes cluster. For example, from one aspect, you can let the resources in one business application. For example, you have some search engine and you have some databases and you have some router, and you can place them. They are all works for the search function, and you can place it in one application. But if you want to have another overview for all the database component, you can also build an application and let it to read all the database object resources in your cluster, and so that the healthy state of the application will indicate that all the database component will be healthy. So that's one of the use case we would like to implement and document it in our official site later.
I think I know the answer to this question, but just asking him if it's a dumb one. Can I take over resources in another namespace?
Yes, I think it's possible. So if you want to, for example, in the K8s object typed component, it is possible to directly dispatch one resource in another namespace by specifying the namespace in the metadata field. So it will be also possible if you add a takeover policy to specify that even if the resources in other namespace already exist, it is possible to manipulate it. So it is possible to do that.
May I ask why you want to take over resources from another namespace? As far as I know that the best practice is using resources only in the same namespace. The namespace is something to do isolation.
That is correct, and that is what we'll be striving for. But in some cases, we might have shared resources that are pooled between a bunch of namespaces. So if you assume I have like, I don't know, maybe a database that I'm creating in another namespace, but it is actually used by 5 other namespaces. So if you consider like a hierarchical namespace, this would be a resource that would be in a parent namespace and is inherited by everything below it. So it is not to take over, mostly a read only than a takeover. But yes, we are striving obviously to retain within the best practices of having everything within a single namespace.
Okay, I think this could be a feature.
Yeah, this is a feature, and we support it. Yeah, there will be no problem for doing that. Although there is another option in the KubeVela controller that in some use case, someone might care about the namespace isolation very critically. So with that flag on, it will be prevented to do that. But in the most default use cases, we have that feature flag disabled so that it will be possible to use application to control the resources in other namespaces.
Thank you.
Thank you for the use case.
Okay, so any other questions? Okay, so if there's no more questions, let's wrap up today's meeting, and thanks Da for his demo and the blog sharing. The recording of the meeting will be uploaded to the YouTube after the meeting's over. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us today. Let's see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.